Hey, welcome to Socialism for All. It's early December 2024, and we just started reading through Volume 1 of Kapital by Karl Marx. We're currently up to Chapter 2, and plan to publish Chapter 3, which is another very long chapter like Chapter 1, next week. Before we go any further with our reading, I just wanted to include a brief note on value and exchange value. These are discussed extensively in Chapter 1, and we also review them in Chapter 2. These are closely related concepts. They're not completely identical, although in certain contexts, such as some of the ones that we were discussing in those chapters, they can basically be synonyms in terms of how they show up in practice, although the concepts are distinct. So that's what I just wanted to go over quickly. Value itself is the socially necessary labor time that it takes to produce a commodity, or that can be said, therefore, to be embodied in a commodity. So it's a quantitative measure of abstract human labor. The trick is that exchange value is how it actually appears to us. So in this sense, it does act as a proxy for value, in the sense that it's how we actually experience value in the trading of commodities. Remember, commodities are goods and services produced for exchange. So in the simple hypothetical examples that Marx is using in Chapter 1, basically when we're talking about exchange value, it is the manifestation of value that we actually, again, interact with. Although goods and services considered as use values are qualitatively different, the 20 yards of linen is qualitatively different than the one coat, they are exchangeable because they contain equal amounts of the same substance, abstract human labor, or value. But remember that we don't deal directly in minutes, seconds, hours, weeks, days, months, years, etc. of socially necessary labor time. That actual magnitude of value, as we discussed, stays behind the scenes, as it were. What we do deal with is exchange value, and we can express the value of one commodity in some quantity of any other commodity. Specifically, the quantity that reflects the same amount of socially necessary labor time or value. So again, although they are separate concepts, exchange value is how value manifests in a transaction in the marketplace. Now, in Chapter 2, we just barely started talking about markets. But as markets evolve, there are conditions under which the exchange value can diverge more from the actual value. In other words, markets can be distorted by things like speculation or monopolies, but we haven't talked about that yet. So again, in the simple examples that Marx is using in Chapter 1, basically value and exchange value are one and the same. In the sense, at least, that value is the embodied socially necessary labor time in a commodity, and exchange value is how that shows up in a transaction, as distinct from use values, the other side of the dual nature of commodities, which is qualitative and has nothing to do with this. So, use values on one side, value and how it actually manifests, exchange value on the other side. And really at this point, the main objective is for you to understand the difference between the qualitative use value side of a good or service, and that can be produced at any stage of history. It's just people making useful things. And the commodity side, when goods and services are not made for use but for exchange, and that's when we consider value and its manifestation in the transaction, exchange value. So again, in the really simple examples that we're dealing with now, those two are the same thing because there are no other forces serving to distort the exchange value. But you shouldn't get the idea that the exchange value is always going to perfectly reflect the value, because there are situations where it doesn't. However, at this stage, if you understand the concepts laid out so far, you're in good shape, and you will be on firm footing to understand the rest of it.